BBC Surrey with Danny Pike. Good morning. It's 11 minutes past 9. So on the programme today, why can it take victims of rape and abuse so long to come forward? Yesterday, the former BBC broadcaster Stuart Hall pleaded guilty to 14 sex offences. The 83-year-old admitted indecently assaulting girls, 13 of them, aged between 9 and 17, between 1967 and 1986. Hall was given bail and will be sentenced next month. Speaking outside court, DCI Neil Essene from Lancashire Police paid tribute to the bravery of Hall's victims.
The fact that these convictions have come after a long time after they were committed shows that we always take any allegations of sexual abuse extremely seriously, and we investigate them thoroughly, no matter how long ago they happened, and we will always try to protect our communities, no matter the status of the alleged perpetrator.
And in an interview with ITV News, one of Hall's victims said he had tried to force himself on me, and it was only the fact there was someone walking along the corridor and the floor creaked that he stopped, and I managed to get away. I will never, ever forget that voice, she said. The abuse against Hall's victims dates back some 5 decades, so this morning we wanted to look at why it takes some victims such a long time to come forward and ask whether we still need to do more to support them. In 1981, when Tina Renton was just 6 years old, her stepfather began molesting her. Over the next 10 years, he repeatedly raped and sexually assaulted her. Although she'd confided in her mother and a teacher about the abuse, police were never called. She left home at 17 and went on to have 2 children. Tina always thought it was too late to prosecute her stepfather until she was studying for a law degree almost 20 years later. When she realised he could still be brought to justice, she told police, and in 2011, David Moore was sentenced to 14 years in prison after being convicted of 7 counts of indecent assault, 3 charges of gross indecency with a child, and 3 counts of rape. She waived anonymity to tell her story, and she wants people to realise it's never too late to bring people to justice for sexual crimes. Tina joins me now. Morning, Tina.
Good morning.
Thank you for talking to us today.
You're very welcome.
At what point in your childhood did you realise that what your stepfather was doing was wrong?
Until I was about 11, when I was taking part in a class in the secondary school. It was a sex education class, and it was at that point really that although I always felt uncomfortable, I knew I didn't like what I was experiencing. Childhood was, there was never any good memories really. But at that point, the penny dropped, if you like, and I realised that actually what he was doing to me was so very wrong.
And is that when you told Mum and your teacher?
No, I didn't actually. No, I was too scared to for a long time, and I kept the abuse to myself for another sort of 3 years after that point.
So in those years, knowing what he was doing was wrong, and I assume he was continuing to do it at that time.
Yes, indeed.
How did you feel about yourself? What was the internal conversation with yourself? I don't like this, I don't want this to happen, but I can't help it.
I didn't know how to stop it. As a victim, I felt that there was an element of blame. It must be my fault somewhere, because the kids are not going through this, so what have I done, or what do I do, which leads this man to come in my bedroom and rape me twice a week or so. It leads you to have no self-esteem, no confidence, you hate yourself, because you believe it's your fault.
And then once you had told your mum, what was her reaction?
Oh, she was very upset. Very upset, as, any mother would be. I mean, it's the scenario that we all dread, that someone would touch and interfere and violate one of our children. It's got to be the worst feeling ever.
But she didn't take any action herself?
No action was taken. So we just, after the cat was out the bag, if you like, life just carried on as it was before.
So how do you feel about your mother now?
I don't feel anything for her. She's just part of that process.
So your total relationship with her is completely broken down now?
I have done for quite a while, yeah, a number of years.
I think people listening will understand why that would be. Once you were an adult, Tina, did you think about trying to take action against him?
There was never a point where I thought, one day I'm going to do that. I always felt that I'd had a certain injustice because the system had failed me and I wasn't protected when the story was first explained at the age of 14. But there was never a point during my early adult life when my children were very young that I thought, this time next year I'm going to have told the police. There was a point in my life where I thought one day I'd like to, but I didn't think I'd ever be brave enough.
And in the meantime, what did you bury it? Try not to think about it? But that must have been impossible.
Well, as any victim knows, you do try and bury it, but some things will always affect you, some things never leave you, some things affect your everyday life, but you just learn to cope with it. Because I'd kept that secret for so long, and I never confided in a soul, and I never told anybody. So for me, even though the abuse had stopped and I'd become an adult, there was never any issue that I needed to move forward with it because I knew how to keep it to myself.
You just made that really clear for me, because that was your normal, if you like. Keeping that secret, while to everybody else that looks abnormal, is your normal.
Exactly, because that was my way of dealing with it, because I had to do it like that when I was a child. The next part of the story is incredible, where you're studying law, and was it a penny drop moment where you suddenly realise, hang on, there is a law here that can help me? Absolutely. It was in my final year of my degree, and we were studying the subject of evidence, and the Sexual Offences Act came into the lesson, and someone asked about a statute of limitations. We're all, a bit guilty of watching CSI and the American programs where there is statute of limitations in all of the places. It just varies. So when someone asked the question, is the statute of limitations in Britain, and the lecturer sort of said no, I just sort of sat there, and it was a penny drop moment. Oh my God, it is actually never too late to bring this man. Does that mean I can still do it? In my own head, you almost have a battle, and within sort of 5 seconds, I was made aware of the fact that actually I can still do it, but I was also very conscious of the fact that I was under so much pressure in my final year at uni. As soon as I learnt it, I buried it until I'd finished my studying.
But that must have been quite an empowering moment to some extent.
Yeah, it was, absolutely it was, because the reality is that, 20 years down the line, with all the suffering, because you don't just suffer when you're going through the abuse, sometimes I think trying to deal with it afterwards can be just as tough. So it was a very moving and very empowering moment for me, but I was also aware that at that point I'd managed to hold my life together for 20 years. I couldn't let it take over my mind at that point when I was so close to finishing my degree, so that had to take priority. So I just, like everything else, boxed it.
Goodness me. I mean, your ability to, as you say, box things off and deal with them later, that is quite remarkable.
Well, I was taught to as a child, you see.
Yeah, I guess, that was part of his control over you, was it?
Yes, it was, yeah.
So when he goes to jail for 14 years and you've watched him across the courtroom and you see him sent to jail, is there any satisfaction there for you? What was your emotion at that point?
Well, Danny, I wasn't in court when he was sentenced, because after I gave evidence I never went back to court. It was all too much to deal with. So I was on the end of the phone at the time, and the police officer that helped me along the way rang me to tell me, and it was just the biggest adrenaline rush I've ever had in my life, and I don't think any high roller coaster or anything such like jumping out of a plane will ever give me that back again. It's relief at last. I'm believed. He was found guilty. CPS did their job amazingly, and it's just, you just know now that you can shut one door and let another one open.
It's remarkable, Tina. Your book is called You Can't Hide, and you're also an ambassador for the charity Embracing Child Victims of Crime.
Yes, lovely charity, I have to say.
Okay, well, good work for them, and if people want to know more about your story, your book, You Can't Hide. And so, with your perspective on all of this and these cases of historic abuse that we've been hearing about in recent weeks, you obviously understand why it's taken some of these victims so long, 40, 50 years to come forward. And
I would probably say, from my perspective, people don't have the education, and I don't mean that anyone's stupid by a long sense, but to take a case to court, there's so much involved. I learned that through my degree, and people don't have that knowledge. People don't know what's expected of them, and people don't have the confidence. Once you've been a victim of this type of crime, it affects your self-esteem and your confidence forever. It's just such a daunting process. I can understand why people don't. You also have to consider, you know, a lot of sex offenders are family members with regards to this type of crime. And so there's always, if there's a family member involved, you've always got to consider the fact if this one person speaks out, they could lose their whole family.
So that's a consideration when family is involved. But in some of the high-profile cases we've been hearing about, like Jimmy Savile and Stuart Hall, as I understand it, when the first allegations were made about Stuart Hall and he defended himself outside the steps of the magistrates' court and said, you know, they're spurious and all of that, following that publicity, more people felt strong enough to come forward and say, yes, he did this to me as well. So is it that feeling that maybe at last you'll be believed and you can tell your story without fear of people just saying, no, he's too powerful, too successful to possibly have done these things?
Yeah, absolutely. When you are, again, a victim of this type of crime, and then you're up against these powerful, professional, famous, high-profile people, you know, I look at it and I go, I'm just Tina Renton. Who would I be to ever take on someone like that? And I'm sure his other victims felt the same way. And so it must be really scary for him, or for the victims. So when he stood on those stairs defending himself, like you say, you know, all these other victims looked and thought, hold on a minute, I'm not the only one. If they've had the courage to come through, they can also know that I can support them too. All these other victims have worked together, although none of them probably know each other, but you know, it's always better to know that if there's one victim of a person, there could be two, there could be three, there could be 100. And it's about knowing that you are going to be believed. That's what it's all about. Knowing you're not going to go through the trauma of giving a statement and nothing's going to be done, because that's a very daunting task.
Tina, stay with us if you would. I'd like to also bring to our conversation Sonia Freebody, who's a manager of RASAC, that's the Rape and Sexual Abuse Support Centre based in Guildford. Sonia, good morning.
Good morning.
Just give me some reaction to what Tina's been telling us.
Well, I've been at the centre now for over 12 years, and her story and her recounting of how she felt and feelings and why she did what she did when she did is the same story we hear every day, all the time, and I identify with it completely.
And do you think in cases like Stuart Hall, time is not a factor? Because some people might say, you know, 40 or 50, nearly 50 years after some of these incidents have taken place, it is very historical. Is it always right to try and prosecute where possible?
Yes, I believe it is. And I also think the victims, if they want justice, this helps them recover. We've got to remember sort of 40, 50 years ago, the society didn't believe people. The police and the CPS didn't help victims, but now things are changing, and I think it's because everyone is now listening and believing that people are coming forward, and I think it's the fact that if one comes forward, more come forward, it's more believable. They're trying to support each other, and they're trying to eradicate it from happening to anybody else, by anybody else in the future.
Do you think it will help victims, not just of the famous and people from the television that we know of? Will it help people in cases like Tina's, where this, you know, very, very close to home?
Yes, I think so. It's very difficult when it's close to home because, as Tina said, it does disrupt the family. You can split the whole family and never have contact with them again. It's very difficult and very hurtful, but if you feel it's the right thing to do for you, and you mustn't be forced by anybody, that you want to seek justice, then you must report it.
And talking about the family, Tina, I wonder, is there any way back for you and your brothers in terms of building a bridge and regaining your family relationship with them, do you think, in the future?
No, I think that when I made a decision to make that first phone call and report the abuse, I knew at that point that I would be sacrificing the relationship of my family, all of them, and I For me, that's not a decision I regret, but I don't need to ever rekindle those relationships now. Life's moved on and I'm a different person for it, so I wouldn't do that.
And I'm sure everybody respects that. But Sonia, for some people, that would be a very big price to pay, an even bigger price than they've already paid, wouldn't it?
Yes, it is for some people, and that's why a lot of people don't speak out about it. They just keep the secret and the silence to themselves, and they suffer in silence. I think Tina was brave probably isn't the word, but I mean, it's brilliant that she's gone forward, that she's studied, that she's worked out how we get round this problem, and she's made it real for so many other survivors that they can do the same if they want to.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that as well, actually. I think that although, the likes of the victims of Jimmy Savile and Stuart Hall, it is still very much in the press, and although these victims are real, people, I don't think, will easily relate to those, whereas I am just a normal victim from a normal family. I'm not saying anyone else is not, but because it's, I think what I'm trying to say is because I'm closer, people can relate to me. I've got a face, I've got a name, I've got a story, and obviously the book, I think it allows people to accept that they're not abnormal because they've been through what I have. And like other victims that have come forward, people just want to know they're normal.
So that's an interesting point Tina makes there, Sonia. People who aren't involved in a high-profile case where it is maybe just one person and their abuser. Has policing changed to when somebody comes forward with an accusation like this, they're more likely to be believed and their claims taken seriously?
Yes, I do. And it's evident in the press that if the police don't take anything seriously, then there is outrage about this and follow-up. So the police are having to take things seriously. They do have dedicated teams who are specially trained in helping victims and listening to them correctly in a caring and professional manner. And there are independent sexual violence advisors now that can support a victim throughout the police and the court system. So there is the support there now that there wasn't many years ago.
And the same with RASAC. I mean, is that the sort of place people could come first before they go to the police and speak to you, or do they go to the police as the first port of call?
There's a mixture, really. Some people will come to us and some will go to the police. We analysed the amount of people coming to us and how many actually reported to the police about 3 years ago. And only 6% of the people that called our helpline ever bothered to report to the police. Now, that was about 3 years ago. We haven't reviewed the figures again yet, but that's...
But in the last 6 months since the Jimmy Savile case first was uncovered, have contacts to you increased?
Oh, yes. We used to get on average 3 people phoning and saying, I want counselling now. And when Jimmy Savile broke, that shot up to about 19 people a week phoning. And we've been trying to deal with this massive intake of people ever since.
OK, many thanks for talking to us. Sonia Freebody from the Rape and Sexual Abuse Support Centre based in Guildford. How do people contact you, Sonia?
They can phone our helpline, which is 01483 546 400, or if you just Google Rape or Sexual Abuse Guildford or RASAC, that will bring our website up with full details.
Sonia, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Many thanks for that. And Tina, how's life now?
It's good, thank you. Yeah, it's moving forward. The book's doing so well, and I get emails from people quite regularly to say that it's helped them move forward in many different ways, and it means that my job's done.
Have you followed your career in law?
Not yet. The course, the next course is, in £10,000 or so, and my budget didn't allow that for a while, so I'm never saying never, but just not been able to fund it right now. So who knows what will happen.
Well, thank you so much for talking to us today, and I wish you all the best. Thank you, Tina.
Thank you, Danny. Bye-bye.
Thanks, bye. There's Tina Renton. Her book is called You Can't Hide, and as I said earlier, she's an ambassador for the charity Embracing Child Victims of Crime. So that's our question on the programme this morning. Why can it take victims of rape and abuse so long to come forward? You can call us 03459 570057. You can email danny.pike@bbc.co.uk. What's been really interesting in this, the Stuart Hall case in particular, was one anonymous letter to a columnist on The Independent really started this off. Just a quote that they put on their front page today from this letter. This was about the girl who was at school, and Stuart Hall had visited the school for a talk. And Stuart Hall, says the writer of this letter, told the head teacher he was impressed by me. Of course, I was flattered, and that's how it starts. What he did to me was to spoil my sense of myself, to fill me with shame and secrecy. And the columnist in The Independent took that letter into Ealing Police Station and sat there for a couple of hours to give it to the desk. He didn't know what would happen with it next. It then went up to Lancashire Police, and we are where we are today with the Stuart Hall case. And after that initial publicity where he stood on the steps of the Magistrates' Court and said these claims are spurious, all those things he said then about defending himself, it seems that even more victims came forward after seeing him say that. So the confidence that gives to people to come forward and be believed is perhaps something good that will come out of this. 03459 570057 is our number. You can give me a call at BBC Sussex and BBC Surrey.